All right. Hey, hello, everybody. Welcome to Connections Online 2025, the day before. My name is Jason Jones. I'm not actually your host for this, but I am going to be kind of our host for this opening session, which is going to be on wargaming the future digitally. My name is Jason Jones. I am the Defense Program Manager for Matrix Pro Sims. I'm a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, where I was a simulation officer for about the last 17 years of my career. Um, so I work for Matrix Pro Sims. I want to give you a little background on us, and then kind of as we go through this, we're going to show you a few of the ways that our products are being used as wargaming tools. I'll talk a little bit about wargaming as a term and what that really means and what we see that digital tools can provide as we go forward. So if you're not familiar with our company, but if you're here, I'm guessing you maybe are. Matrix Pro Sims is the brand under which Slitherine Software UK and Matrix Games work together to provide, kind of high fidelity commercial off the shelf products, to professional users. So if you know Slitherine Software, it's more of kind of the Starship Troopers, Battlestar Galactica, but again, kind of in the strategy terminology of the gaming community. So not the strategic, operational, tactical necessarily. Matrix Games, much more focused on highly detailed, military themed products, working from the tactical up to the, higher operational and strategic level. Our company's got offices around the world. And again, our goal is for the pro side is to bring, low overhead requirements with high fidelity commercial off the shelf software. Um, it's a cool space to be in, but I recognize that it also, we've got to do it right, or we don't get the results that we're shooting for, or worse, we get bad results. And so that's one of our focuses: is how do we do it right? So just start off with a little game. For those of you of a certain age, one of these things is not like the other, would not be that unfamiliar a term. And so again, keeping with the theme of wargaming, I believe we've all seen this picture here, there, and everywhere. You can start to guess at the theme as we show the second image. Okay, so we kind of have a feel for theme here. Okay, now we've gotten a little bit different. Maybe we've modernized the picture in the lower right. And maybe at this point you've figured out which of these things is not like the other. And so we've got a bunch of soldiers in VR displays, individually living in their own world and their own universe. And I think from a wargaming perspective, particularly with a maybe with a tabletop background, I think this is that lower left is kind of is the worst case. If somebody says they're wargaming and that's what they're doing, clearly that's not what we're thinking of. Within the images, I know the upper left image is in fact a war game. Some of you have seen it from posts and articles online. That's actually the Naval War College came out to Hawaii. I was in that unit. We were doing actually an integrated air and missile defense war game with our partners and partner nations in the Pacific. Uh, Dr. Bundy, if you remember Dr. Bundy from Naval War College, actually came out and led that. I was the simulation guy and really just expected it to be a war game with tabletop. He showed up with 4 different simulations, and we war gamed digitally by trying to put together a bunch of tools that didn't belong with each other. But I think it stayed true to the idea of wargaming. Now, that was 2013, maybe 2014, so a little over a decade ago. Not to say that we were doing it wrong. This is what we see kind of in the modern era for digital wargaming. And so if you think back to the pictures on the previous, this is not a bunch of people in VR individually playing the game. That is that is a very different story when it comes to digital wargaming and how we see it. We'll actually talk about what this organization is here in a few minutes, but this is a naval center of excellence for operations in confined and shallow waters. And they've been using one of our products, Command Professional Edition, which is you'll hear from today, as a wargaming tool. And I'm going to talk kind of as we go through this about how we got from digital systems into wargaming and why I think we're a good fit not the only fit, but a good fit. And so this is kind of the agenda. I want to talk a little bit about games for training, um, because I think it's where a lot of us see um, that image with everybody in VR systems. I want to talk about how training is not wargaming, and vice versa, some of the different effects. I'll talk about digital wargaming, what it isn't or doesn't have to be. I will mention a few use cases, and then we'll talk about wargaming with Matrix Pro Sims and our products. So we'll have a quick run through from a few of those from the guys on those teams. So let's get started. Games for training. This is my background. This was my thesis when I was in graduate school, doing commercial off-the-shelf multiplayer game to conduct training on infantry squad tactics. And we used, if you're familiar, this is early 2000s. So we used Delta Force, Black Hawk Down, Team Saber. You can see a lovely picture of our, range where we help them practice all of their weapons. Let's talk about gaming and why games and digital products may be fraught in this space, because it is a game. But military discipline is required when you're going to use it. And I say that in the context of what we were doing in our thesis, but I would also apply that to digital use, use of digital games for a war game, because you still need to bring the structure and essentially the tabletop concepts of how we play the game into that digital environment if you want to get similar effects. And just like what we had to do for our thesis, we had to use a task analysis to make sure we had the right tools for the job, so we knew what effects we were going to have, or what area we might be able to focus our war game participants. And what we found really is the primary effects, not surprisingly, were on cognitive skills and communication. Nobody's learning how to better aim a weapon by moving a mouse. Well, maybe in the modern era with a drone, but maybe using a mouse to pick out targets in this environment was not what an infantry squad is going to do. We can discuss the future later. But again, the effects are primarily cognitive. But in this case, they were very task focused. And this is where we really start to get into the difference between wargaming and training. In the world of wargaming, and again, I'm not going to go super deep into it. I think our focus is cognitive, which was what we got, but it was really about thinking, and we adjudicated in support of the thinking and planning, not for the sake of I shot you, you didn't shoot me. But it is not task centric. It's not about issuing orders specific. It can be. It is not driving a vehicle. It's not shooting something. The goal is kind of discovery, some learning, and kind of broadening horizons and maybe learning more. Whereas training is very much a procedural focus, and it's employing our real world systems and processes or methods to achieve. It is very task and process centric, and our goal is really performance. So when we look at those, they do have separate objectives, and that's where I say that's where um, you know this digital product is just a variation on the board when we use it that way. And so this is why, I mean, this image right here is essentially, one person in their VR system doing nothing. They're, well, not doing nothing, but this is not a training. This is very training oriented, maybe less so wargaming. But this is how we see wargaming with a digital product: is maybe that one person is just essentially the RTO in old talk. They're the person inputting the orders and generating the actions that everyone else in the room, the staff, the analytical team, whatever element, those are the ideas are generated by them and input through that one person. And because we're digital, we can take advantage of other capabilities. We can put displays in other areas. And so now more people can see the board, see the table, figure out how to make this work. How do I now I can distribute. There's a lot of other things, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But before we dive into that, I do want to give a couple of examples of where we've seen, digital platforms make a difference. And I think most of us know this, and we know that simulations are out there that can do a lot of this work to find out, should I buy the Arrow hypersonic missile? Should I buy the Iron Dome? Um, which methods and which techniques can I use? And we know those simulations exist. But this is also, those are two use cases where one of our products came into play to kind of help them do the analysis, because it has some tools and some capabilities that we'll show in a little bit, and discuss more, to help enter into the discussion. And then last October, we had an article came out in the Wall Street Journal. I highlight us, one of our products, Command Professional Edition, because that's about us. But this article was really on the concept of wargaming, but it was, it's how some people are using our stuff. So what are some more specific examples? Our professional clients for digital solutions include about 23 nations, over 150 organizations and thousands of users. And what we see from a wargaming, and these are very wargame focused topics, is that image where we had the one person looking at the display and then being able to go in and put in inputs. That is our NATO Center of Excellence for Operations in Confined and Shallow Waters, and they have been doing war games that may be on the edge of education, could be even closer to training. But again, the idea is we're not putting people with hands-on systems. We're focused on the cognitive component, but have been working with many nations. The Luftwaffe similarly employing command to kind of help students understand the implications of the different aspects of air power. The U.S. Navy, probably since about 2019, has been using command for conceptual force war games repeatedly. They've started to expand and gotten into some operational war games, in particular with partner nations. And so we're seeing big growth in this as a wargaming tool, because for reasons that we'll discuss throughout the day, gives them not only the tool for the moment, but the tool for later. And then the U.S. military academy, so the West Point guys, are using combat mission to teach the fundamentals of tactics to cadets. And so if you're not familiar with command or Flashpoint or combat mission, we're going to dive into each of those a little bit more today. And so what does this look like? Again, this technology in wargaming is just a supporting tool. Essentially, we have gone from drawing in the dirt, making small pieces, making tabletop boards, but now we can, we've got the easy display access and distribution of the tabletop. We can save the game state. I'm going to explore that here in a little bit. We've got the adjudication. We can use dice. We can allow the system to do the adjudication and roll its, metaphorical dice. But we can always defer to expertise. We are not locked in. In a training event, we may be more locked into the results of adjudication. But in a war game, we can always make the decision to throw out that result, bring that unit back, let's try it again, or better yet, go back to a previous game state and do it differently to see what the effect might be. Again, to learn, to figure out if we're making progress. We can record and replay the state of our fight. We can watch that phase through, and we'll see a little bit of that later. And then, if useful, we've also got the potential to access other technologies. So artificial intelligence, virtual reality, other simulations and models. Again, it's not required, but those are some options that become available to you. So again, going back to the idea of wargaming versus training, the only other point that I'd like to make on this is, with training, digital tools are principally used to stimulate real world systems and processes. That's not how we see wargaming use of digital tools. It's really just to support their understanding of the environment and to provide its rules. So with that in mind, and this really, I think this is at the heart of the concern over digital tools and wargaming, which is, it's everybody's on their own machine, everybody's playing their own piece of the game, and we're not doing the opportunity to think, grow, and learn in the larger environment. Um, but that's a lot closer to what the training environment is. And with wargaming, we can still take a single version of software and still get the environment together, and we get some other benefits. And so I'll just give a quick slide on gaming-enabled wargaming and experimentation. So we're just going to look at two pathways through a war game. And so in manual wargaming, we're moving from game state to game state, sequentially. Let's say I get to state 5 and I want to reorganize the cells to conduct manual excursions. I can do that. It's feasible. It's always going to have a manpower cost, but it may have a bit more of a time cost to set up other variations of the game. But when I do gaming enabling, because of some of the tools, we can simply use the save game file. And then we take that game state 5 and we put it on 3 different computers, let's say in 3 different rooms or all in one room, and we can go conduct excursions simultaneously by moving the board very quickly and very easily, relative to the manual set. And when I want to jump back, let's say I've gotten to the end of this phase of the war game, but I want to go back and look at something. Again, I load a save game file, and I can go into excursions or do whatever I wish to do. With manual, I think it's more challenging to go back and recreate, especially a much further back game state as an excursion or in a future war game or the jumping off point. With a digital system, again, we can load a save game file for COA excursions, and we can maybe dive into game state 2 Bravo, where we didn't, we like that outcome and where it's going versus 2 Alpha and 2 Charlie. Maybe we can take another save file and go even further into excursions. We ask ourselves the question, was this outcome normal? Do we think it's normal, or do we want to dive deeper into some of these? We can go in with some gaming products and we could run that fight 1,000 times. We, input our orders or intentions, and then let's see what the data looks like. So again, I see these as different tools in the toolbox for the wargamer, and none of this replaces the need for that war game manager to be in place to put the structure, the rules, the behavior, what are the expectations on the players into the environment. It's a different way to move the pieces around. So with that said, and just kind of that intro to this, I do want to kind of open up our next speakers. And so again, we're going to look and they're going to look a little bit at wargaming for analysis, education, and training to some extent, because depending on what you're doing, it is possible to train using the tools. And we'll look at a sample of users. As we go throughout this, the United Kingdom's Defense Science and Technology Lab is a big wargaming organization, and have dove into all of these products and use them in various ways. Marine Corps University, the military academies, and different work from the services. So you'll see a little bit of each of those as we go through it. I will readily tell you we're not hiding things. There's just some things that are classified that we can't discuss. I will also say that as a company, we don't have our facility clearance, so we don't know most of the secrets anyway, but we have some impressions based off of, for instance, in combat mission, we know that they've been asked to build future systems and see how they might fight when fielded with a standard organization or a modified organization. So we do know that some of the work going on is wargaming a future, and in not all cases is that lasers and teleporters. For the most part, it's what would my formation look like with this, or what if I change this capability to allow me to do that. And so that's what we're going to see here over the next few minutes. Again, if you've got questions or want to learn more about our products, you can go use the QR code or our link there to go to our product or our page. My email address is at the bottom. So again, feel free to reach out if you'd like to learn more. And with that, Merle, I would like to turn it over to our next presenter, Brandon Johnson, who's going to talk about Command Professional Edition.
For Command PE. I started off back in 2013 as a beta tester for Command on the commercial side. I started streaming it on Twitch in 2016, and then in 2020, I joined the team officially as the training manager. So what I'm going to be talking about today is Command Professional Edition. So we'll be talking about giving you a brief overview of Command PE, talking about wargaming with Command PE, creating the future or editing the database, how to use Lua to support order of battle upload to build the board, so to speak, and then saving the game, which is data output, save game files, and record and playback. So for those that have never heard of Command PE, it is a all-domain physics-based battle space. It primarily focuses on air and sea domains with limited support for land and some space and cyber effects. It's detailed level 1 on the terrain, and it has a database of the world's frontline air and maritime equipment from 1946 to the near future. What's important about the database is it's all editable, which I'll get to that more here in a couple of minutes. But before I go into the database, I want to talk more about wargaming with Command PE. Now, Command PE typically is usually one operator on one machine. But what we typically see for most war games is something more akin to this, where you have 1 or 2 operators on one machine supporting a staff or a seminar. Now, this could be a blue team this could be just one staff, or this could be blue on one side of the room, red on the other side of the room, with those 1 or 2 operators inputting the orders. And then in both cases, everyone's watching it play out on one big screen and then inputting their changes to their plan. The U.S. Navy has conducted more than 10 future capability war games using this method since 2023. Wargaming future concepts for both the U.S. and potential adversaries. This style has also been used by educational entities like Marine Corps University, as well as entities like Fight Club. And Command also has a multiplayer for up to 16 machines. And this could be like an 8 versus 8. So this could be your land component, your air component, your naval component, each have an operator, each inputting the orders for both the blue and the red. Or this could be any number of various combinations of that. And kind of going back to I'd like to go back to talking about the database now. So as I mentioned, we have a fully editable open source database. Has over 5,000 ships now, over 700 submarines, over 7,000 aircraft, over 300 satellites. What's important about the database, though, is that our entities are not just single unit entities. They are a system of systems. So, for example, we have on this F-22 here, we have the airframe, so its signature, its agility, its capabilities. We have its onboard cannon. We have its countermeasure dispensers, its propulsion, its comms, its sensors. And each of these are basically determined by MS access tables, which are editable to change the in-game performance. So if you wanted to remove the onboard cannon and replace it with a laser, it's just a simple couple of clicks. And it's similar for ships. Ships have their hull, they have their different weapons, they have their sensors, they have their aviation facilities in this case as well. So creating the future and editing the database. So I'm going to do a quick live demonstration of this. So what I have here is I have a generic loitering munition that I'm going to be making some modifications to. I'm going to rename it, going to change its range, going to apply some shaping, going to change its propulsion. So general overview of the form here. Up here at the top, we have the general characteristics of the platform. So its name, its length, its wingspan. Below that, we have its signature values. What's important about the signatures is that these are automatically determined via these parameters, so the length, the wingspan of the platform. But what you can do is you can come into any of these platforms and manually override them. So in this case, it's -19 for the front aspects and the radar A to D bands. And we could come in here and say it's -20, -50, whatever values we need. Well, that we have different capability codes, or I'm sorry, different modifiers. And what these are, just you want to generally apply general characteristics that match similar to platform X. So in the case of radar, we could come in here and say, let's apply general medium shaping similar to what you see on an AGM 154. And once I refresh, we can see that the values for the AD and EMN bands on radars have been updated. Well, that we have propulsion, we have sensors, illuminators, comms data links, warheads, and the weapon records. And then over here is basically it's what this weapon can target. So we're going to name this to advanced loitering munition. Going to change it up its range by about 30%. So make this 715. We've already applied our shaping. Going to swap out the propulsion from a piston prop engine to a turbojet engine. And then to compensate, going to apply some additional fuel. And then we can because we now have a bigger weapon, we can now go and increase the warhead size from a 25 kilogram to 50 kilogram high explosive. And now in just a couple of minutes, we have quickly created a brand new platform that we could test versus the old one and see, does the changes we made actually offer effective, is it cost effective to build this platform versus continue to build and use existing platforms? So Command at its core is a commercial software. And what that means is that we have to be easy to use. So in this case, in this video demonstration here, we're going to go from an empty map to a base defense scenario in about 15 minutes. We're going to start off by placing some runways. We're going to build out the airbase. We're going to manually place some runways, some taxiways, some aircraft shelters. Now we're going to place the runway, we place the access point. Now we're copying those access points around. Going to place some open parking spots for aircraft. But because of the commercial nature of Command, we've had many of our commercial users have built out previously a lot of these existing facilities. And what that has allowed is basically for anyone, pro or on the commercial side, to go in and actually import those facilities as a starting point for your war game. And so here we're going to load in Suda Air Base here. And then we can see there now, instead of having to manually place all of this has actually been pre-positioned and pre-placed for us in this scenario. Now, in the rest of this video, we're going to go in, we're going to place some air defenses around this air base. We're going to place some radars, we're going to place some SAMs. We're going to place some Cortals here for the SAMs. And we're not going to watch this entire video. I'm going to fast forward through most of this. Place an ASRAM launcher. And then we're going to switch to the red side. And then we're going to place some aircraft here at the red air base. In this case, we're going to use like a single unit air base. So we're going to place some aircraft here. set their loadouts. And then we'll set up their missions. And then once we've done this, we can actually now execute this. And so our red aircraft here are going to attack this red airbase or this blue airbase. And so we can see there, they've been detected. They're now turning around. Blue has detected the incoming weapons. They'll now be engaged by the blue air defenses. Second wave of weapons have now been detected. They'll be engaged as well. And that completes this very simple air defense video. So that's interesting, but it's what if my scenario is larger? So what we have is we have a scripting language called Lua. Lua is designed to be built into other programs. It's very lightweight. So what we have here is the ability to actually take information from Excel and actually import that into command via Lua. So what we have here, just some facilities for a scenario, just in a Excel spreadsheet. We have a red air base. We have some defended facilities that red's going to be defending. This is what you might get in a typical annex from any sort of scenario for a war game. What we can then do is we can then basically apply, the information from command. So we've got things like the database ID for that entity. So in this case, 1877 for the single unit air base. We're setting very large buildings for each of the defended facilities. We apply a latitude and longitude, potentially a heading. And then what all this information does is all this gets concatenated into this final column I here, which if we look up here at the top is just an Excel formula, taking the information from each of the various cells and then filling it in here. So we can say red airbase, it's on side red, it's a facility, all that information that we just talked about. And what we can do is we can come in here, we can copy it. We can come in here to command where I've already pre-set up a red and blue side. I've set them to hostile against each other. We're going to turn on the God's Eye view here as well. So we're going to see everything. And then I can open up the Lua console. I can paste that information in. I can run it. And we can see there are the defended facilities and that red air base. And it's the same thing for ships. So we've got three ships on the blue side here. All that similar information. So database ID, latitude and longitude of the ships, all being concatenated over here into this final column. So land units. So in this case, air defenses for the red side. Aircraft for both the blue and the red side. Aircraft being based on the carrier, and then blue aircraft being based on the carrier, and then red aircraft at their air base. And then there, with just a couple of clicks, we've quickly created a scenario entirely via Lua. And if we look at the carrier, we can see there are all the different aircraft that we placed, which we can continue to modify if we dare. So we can come into here, we can say, we can manually edit all of this. So if we say, all right, so we want to add unmanned systems to complement the manned aircraft on this carrier. So we can give them a call sign, we can determine a number, we can add them. And then now we can see that we've now added a squadron of unmanned combat air vehicles to this carrier to complement the manned aircraft. Now, in the case of a much larger scenario, or as examples of a much larger scenario, I have a series of blue and red ships here for a operation in the Pacific, or a scenario in the Pacific that I'll be using as a larger example of how this works on a larger scale. So we can take this column, copy that, Paste that in. And if we come over here into the South China Sea, we can see, how this works on a much larger scale. In a couple of clicks, I've placed a couple hundred ships here. And then finally, I want to talk about, saving the game, data output, recording, and playback. So we've already talked about building the scenario, provide your mission orders. So command exports data to all common formats. So CSV, SQL, MS Access. We export different data types. So weapon endgame, the unit's damaged. What this allows you to do is actually get more information about what happened during your war game. Why did that missile miss? Why, you were expecting, for example, you may have been expecting 80% of your air defense missiles to intercept ballistic missiles, but only, say 60 of 100 missiles intercepted. Well, why did those other missiles miss? Example of that here is a engagement of a helicopter versus a submarine. So up here at the top line, we have the submarine, or we have the torpedo that's dropped by the helicopter engaging the submarine. We can see that the torpedo seeker, or the submarine, attempted to seduce the incoming torpedo with countermeasures. In this case, it had a probability of 50%. We then rolled the dice, which in this case was an 18, which was a failure in this case. Torpedo then goes on to the next event, which is the torpedo engaging the submarine itself. In this phase, if available, command applies different modifiers. So the proficiency of the crew, agility, etc., would all get applied in this phase if relevant. In this case, none of that is. So we have the torpedo, base 80%, had a base pH of 80%, did the die roll, resulted in a 67, which resulted in a hit. And while that's interesting, it only gives you one data point. Command is a completely stochastic simulation. So every time we roll a dice, it's going to be different. So what we offer is a Monte Carlo mode where you can run your scenario, multiple times. Run it 100 times, run it 1,000 times, run it 1,000,000 times, to basically get the distribution of those events multiple times. So was that torpedo base 80? Does that torpedo actually hit 80% of the time? Maybe, maybe not. Were there any interesting outliers during those runs that may be worth going and investigating further? Finally, command actually has a record and playback feature. What this does is the record function is not a video. What it is it is a series of saved games that are sliced together that are combined together in a single file that lets you scrub or play back the save, and then go to that point, go to a point, and then continue on from there. So as an example, I'm going to load one here. And what this scenario generally is, the scenario is a very simple demo or air-to-air warfare demo. And then what I can do is I can scrub through this manually. Or what I can do is I can go ahead and hit play. I can increase the time it plays back. Or I can scrub through this. And what's interesting about this particular scenario is that the F-16 up here in the north actually gets shot down by the tail gun on the Tu-22 Badger that's detected here. Well, we could go back to a point right before that engagement, and we can say, like, all right, well, we're going to continue from here and explore what happened. And this is relevant for war games because we can, instead of having to make a save or reset the board manually to a given point, we can just scrub here into the file and go, all right, we reached a decision point. Do we want to explore COA A or do we want to explore COA B? Well, you can explore both. You either make a save, you make a recording, and then you explore one COA, then you go back to that point later and you explore the other COA. And maybe those leads to different branching from there. Maybe that leads to COA C and D. And that concludes my section of this presentation.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Robert Crandall. I'm the president and founder of On Target Simulations. We created the Flashpoint Campaigns family of games. Currently selling Flashpoint Campaigns Southern Storm through Matrix, and I'm going to show you Flashpoint Campaigns Professional Edition. Merle, if we could just switch over to my slides next, that would be great. That's my contact information. What is Flashpoint Campaigns? It's a tactical war game of Cold War or modern land combat using what we call an asynchronous WeGo-based command cycle. Yes, that's a mouthful. I'll explain it later. It's tanks, attack helicopters, multiple launch rocket systems, electronic warfare. It's high-intensity modern combat on the ground. The game itself, it's a toolkit. Apart from being the thing, it's a toolkit for training and testing new ideas. And I'll explain that a bit longer. 3 of the 6 developers of the game served in the US Army in Germany at the time of the Cold War. It was designed from the ground up to reward proper military tactics. It's not a puzzle game. It's not a tower defense game. It's meant to be something truly useful, what they wish they had at the time. Game scale, 500 meters per hex. Maps are 20 kilometers by 15. The maneuver units, the counters, typically are platoons, but there's also down to sections and up to companies, depending on the circumstances. They are not pure units. They are amalgams. So you might have almost any number of these, but say an infantry unit, it might have infantry, it might have heavy weapons, it might have a mortar or 2, it might have an air defense system or 2, might have multiple different anti-tank systems. We don't represent with just a single number. We say, no, there's this system, this squad, these guys have this equipment. So what you're seeing on the screen are collections of subunits, which we model at that level and lower. The game, you're typically commanding a strong battalion to a weak regiment, something like that. The scenarios are about 4 to 14 hours in length. So ammunition matters, but fuel and other logistics, not so much. The game is resolved in a WeGo. So each side puts in its orders during stop time, and then there's a joint turn resolution. And we'll see a bit of that in a moment. Going forward, this is a shot of the game again. It's a Windows program. If you can run a Windows program with buttons and drop-down menus, hyperlinks, you can operate this game. Map is zoomable. There's full fog of war. What you're looking at here in the picture is a top-down view of the map. There are 4 core information displays down the right. It's like the game state, you, the player, your forces, and sort of a mini map. And in this shot, we also have sort of the weapons encyclopedia up so that they can browse the various data points for a particular weapon system that's in use. There are lots of hotkey functions. There's all kinds of things to make a very accessible game. It's been in development for over 20 years, this and its predecessors. And I think over time, it kind of shows the polishing that we've been doing. This is the complicated slide. Something that's a feature of this game is that we allow the authors of the scenarios and other interested parties to create battle plans. And these aren't scripts, but it's kind of in the thought of scripts. So you have a force, the blue side. It's composed in turn of other forces. So you might have a battalion, and each of your forces is one of the companies. Off-map artillery might be another force. Air might be another force. Attack helicopters or scout helicopters, another force yet. And you can go through these forces and express your intent. You can say, move from here to here at this time, and then take up a screen. Or for attack helicopters, you can explicitly tell them to go hunt and lay out the waypoints of the route that they're to fly, looking for trouble. Roll all this up, you've got a battle plan. It's not for you, it's for the computer player. So there'll be a variety of battle plans to the other side, each one quite different potentially. And it will select one that you pick or one at random. And that will then control the higher levels of the computer player. These plans, these battle plans, are saved off as separate files, so you can share them. If you make a killer, blue plan for this scenario, you can send it to your buddies or other schools or wherever it is you're at and have them try it out. Actually, before I get to this slide, what I'd like to do is jump to my a video, and I'll just show you just a couple minutes of actual game action, so you can kind of get a deeper sense of what it is you'll be seeing here. Thank you, Merle. Boop, 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 boop. It's a share screen. There we go. Here's the game, like I described. There's one unit in particular. These tan-colored units are British. We have a couple of newly identified Russian units down in the bottom right. What we've done is given one section of a recon company movement orders to come down following this turquoisey line ending here. These numbered boxes are waypoints. They tell it where to move to. They're going to end here at this crossroads, presumably to get oversight over this stretch of the A44 highway as red units seem to be coming in from the right and moving off to the left. Please, everybody, don't do this at home. I'm a trained developer. I explore corner cases. Don't you send out unsupported recon elements directly into the teeth of the enemy like this. It's just going to end badly. And in fact, that is what we will see. Let me just start that. And to begin with, here's a pop-up menu, classic Windows. What we're going to do is look at the dashboard. We have a unit dashboard here, and this lists all the orders that currently are assigned to that unit. And order 1 is waypoint 1, order 2, waypoint 2, and so on. And at the end, it's got a hold order. It has a terminal order, and this is what it does. So you can view in great detail just what it is, and in fact, do extensive modifications of each leg of that order. It brings us to a point, because this is not a game where you move all your units every turn. This is one where you give orders, and those orders continue until they're done. The turn in this case is 23 minutes, I would say, by the look of that. But you can give 3 or 4 hours worth of orders, and it will then proceed to do them without further input from you. This unit has these orders. The movement orders we're looking at, they're move hasty in this case, which is even worse for its longevity. Let's click ahead again. Look at a bit more of the dashboard. Go to the subunits display. When I said, yeah, we model down to the tank or the tube or the helicopter, whatever, this is what I'm talking about. This unit has 4 vehicles, and I can read the fine print, but you probably can't. That's a Land Rover and 3 FV-432 carriers. They've got passengers. These are all Milan teams. So this is what that unit is. And it fights as a collection of these subunits. So only what they can do individually is what happens. And if they engage with the enemy, we look at the enemy subunits. Oh, it's 5 tanks, T-80s, or whatever they're going to be. And so the interrelationships will be worked out in detail at that level. On the right, we see some critical information, typically the ammo counts, whether it's got a radar up or a radar detector. Oh, I should mention, if you click on any of these, you can pull up the subunit encyclopedia. So you can see exactly what we think at FV-432 are, or exactly what a Milan team can or cannot do. You don't need to, but that level of detail is available for you. Now here we're clicking on a Milan to see what's going on with them. just jumped over to the staff. For those of you who do management by exception, this is where you see the exception reports. If it's out of ammo, if it's out of supply, if it's shattered morale or has no readiness, that will all show up here in flaming yellow or red letters. That's not the case. So what we do see is, oh, here are the artillery units in support. Here's the overall ammo situation. And if it could see any of the enemy units, would have a list of enemy contacts down the right. Again, you don't need to dig into all this, but it's there. There's an incredible amount of drill down information for all of this. What we're looking at here is the unit log. So a bit like what we just saw in command, we keep voluminous detail. Every hex they've moved, every spotting they've had, every time they fired at something. This is for the unit in particular. You can do it for the whole side. And because it's overwhelming, you get to filter it. Just show me the movement events. Just show me the combat events. Just show me any interaction that this guy had with an enemy unit by name, or something else where a free text search will work. Carrying on. Close the unit dashboard. What we're going to do now is start turn execution, which we've now done. Nobody else has any orders, so we're just going to see the enemy moving. You see them winking in and out, and then our guy is going to start moving. He's coming down the road. We have a helpfully positioned smoke screen, which he's going to pass through and then emerge from. You see enemy units coming and going. This landscape is modeled in 3D, and we work out 3D lines of sight continuously. There's a lot of enemy there. Yeah, this is not going to go well for our friend, but things are moving along. I should add that in this game, he moved really quite quickly. That's an advantage of being a recon unit. Most other units, there's a certain amount of time for the orders delay. It takes a while to communicate. It takes a while to do this and do that. And yes, we just discovered an enemy unit. This is what combat looks like. It's a byproduct of everything else happening. You get detailed combat results telling you what's going on. In this case, the font's really small, but for those of us with older eyes, you can bump up the font size. Or if you don't want to see that, you can just hide it. All of the speeds, everything that's going on for this display can be sped up, slowed down, enlarged, what have you. Just one survivor left. And he's gone. And that is the clip. That's what a combat looks like. That's what movement prior to that. That's how the orders are that create it. I don't think there's much else of interest here, so let's just jump back into the PowerPoint, please. Okay. In the top right corner of that screen, we have these two core displays. One of them is the game clock, the game state, and the other is your player stats. The way this game works, the turn lengths aren't necessarily the same for each side. In a typical board game, certainly in a lot of computer games, exercising command is instant and costless. Here there are command delays, and if you're pretty beat up, it's going to be quite a long delay. We explicitly model the command cycle based on national proficiency, unit readiness, and HQ capacity, especially readiness. And this display over on the right of Lieutenant Colonel Thompson shows the factors that go into that calculation. In this game, his command cycle is going to be 26 minutes. In the one that we just saw the video of, it was 23. For the blue side, it was 30 minutes for the red side, for whatever reason. And it can change. If you throw your forces into a headlong assault, they get beat up. Your readiness plummets because they're a mess. Your command cycle will stretch out. This represents the staff falling behind processing all the orders and getting things set up for the next thing. If you rest your forces and you deliberately make an operational pause in the scenario, they'll recover and your command cycle will start shortening again. It creates all these delicious dilemmas. as a commander, what are you going to do? If you make a big move and take a big swing at things and miss, you could be in just a whole lot of trouble, and not just through losses. Typically, command cycles will last from 15 to 45 minutes. Like I said before, orders persist for multiple turns, so you don't have to keep going back to revisit a unit to keep moving it down a road. It will just take care of itself. This helps the player focus on the big picture and avoids micromanagement, fiddling. And that brings us around to the training side of things. Oh, but before we get there, a special factor in this game, Command talked about how their database is open. So's ours. We use Excel. And so if you can use Excel already, you can modify and create data right from the national OBs and TOEs right down to, oh, okay, well, here's how many kinds of M1 Abrams we have. We have 22 already in the modern database. You might laugh, it's more like 30, real estate in terms of significant military differences. So fine, add in new rows. Just cut and paste from the existing ones that you know, and then put in the new values that you want to use. Units have subunits, individual tanks. Tanks have individual armaments. They have sensors. The armaments in turn can have individual munition types. And then you can set up, okay, here's the default ammo load for an Abrams of this particular type. You can name the units whatever you like. You can do all kinds of things to make it yours. In addition to that level of detail, and I think a bit like Command again, we have what we call special characteristics, which is entirely separate set of just special flags that you can attach to your units. And a good case of that would be, say, active reactive armor, explosive reactive armor. We have 5 levels of that, depending on the generation that's in there. You can add more. And then you can say, okay, ERA 6 is going to be an attribute of this new Abrams variant that I just created. And so it piles in, you get all the extras. And we've had people look through these and go, yeah, I can kind of figure this out, even without any training. We have 800 pages of documents, and a lot of them are devoted to this. But honestly, it's fairly simple. If you're an Excel guy or person, it doesn't take long to figure this out. We ship all the editors, and the open architecture extends not just to units in the database, but to the graphics, the artwork, everything basically that we could let the users reasonably change can be changed to personalize it, to customize it, to make it unique to what you're trying to do. Pro features and content. Some of you may be familiar with our Southern Storm game that's currently for sale, and that's set in the Cold War period in Germany, specifically in 1989. The Pro game is much more modern. It has 6 modern nations built in, including China. It includes maps for training areas. Fort Hood, now Fort Cavassos, if I recall correctly, but 29 Palms, the NTC. In the UK, we have Salisbury Plain and Southwick. We're not expecting battles to be fought there, but we're expecting training exercises to be done there, and we give you a map of those. Another pro content feature, and I've not even begun to talk about it, but we have a tactical operations center concept, and it was on the main game. One of our developers was a brigade staff officer for what was in the 1st Brigade of the 4th Division. And he said, Rob, we need to make the reports that I needed back then. And we did. We made 31 different reports. When this is being used, you can have any or all of those reports created on the fly in the background and then drop to a network share. And I'll show you in a bit why that would matter. But if you have a team of people using it, they don't have to cluster around the one person running the game. They just have their laptops pointed to that network share, and they will get the intel reports. They'll get the ops reports. They'll get the fire support reports delivered to them as it goes. With any pro game, you need to have an umpire mode for white cell operations, and we have an extensive one. It was the original egregious cheat mode that we used to use. But you can move units around. You can change the value of victory point locations. If there's an inconveniently located minefield, you can dispense with it, or you can create a bunch more. White cell operations, whatever you like. Magic, oops, got to get used to this. Magic numbers are the core game parameters. These are numbers that are sort of just set just because. So an example of one might be, well, if you enter a minefield, what are the chances of being hit by a mine? Oh, it's 30% in this game. We expose that for the pros so they can change it. If they want it to be 60%, 70%, 5%, they just change it. We have a long list of these so-called magic numbers that they can just go in and play with to get the effect that they want. We have Lewis scripting. That's a reasonably recent addition. And this is a Lewis script over on the right-hand side. It's what it looks like. This is so we can integrate with outside systems. And one of the first, of course, was command, although we haven't done a great deal with that yet. But we can receive inputs from the outer world and send game state information back to the outer world. An example of the latter is this one here. It's called select active units with subunits of type. So you can query the blue side and say, which of your units by name have tanks in them, or weapons of mass destruction, or a particular whatever, a subunit type. And it will return a list. So much we could do with that, and will over the course of time. Another pro feature are artillery fire support groups. In the base game, you just assign artillery missions in onesies and twosies to individual units. In real life, of course, they group them. And the Fire Support Control Center, which we model in this game, will call on a group to fire, not individual units. And the benefit of creating those is you can then create targeting lists and say, this particular group is most interested in firing against air defense assets, or is most interested in headquarters or supply units, whatever. You can just rank them, and it then follows through on them. In the commercial market, that's kind of getting complex, but for pros, very helpful, very useful. It's the kind of thing we're keen to add more of. Finally, in the pro game, there's civilians on the battlefield. In our case, they function as speed bumps. They spawn when the enemy gets too close. They follow a particular path towards an exit hex, and then they disappear. These are civilians on the road. Clicking again. Big thing for pro is we do a lot of data logging. We heard that command does a great deal, and so do we, although it's in a somewhat different format. Ours takes the form of what's called the tidy data format. So it's CSV files with referential integrity. And as the game plays, it just writes them to the hard drive. What's interesting is that when you're giving orders and then locking the orders but haven't executed them yet, it's still written to the hard drive. So you can have another process watching those, interpreting those, and coming back to the user potentially saying, great idea, not so good an idea. If we had had something like that for our reconnaissance platoon, it might have said that path in these circumstances is inadvisable. I was going to say mind-boggling. It's not so mind-boggling anymore, but all kinds of real-time information possibilities, trading back and forth for machine learning is possible now with this game. But the part that's closest to my heart is the training part. Like I said, 3 of us were served. One was an actual brigade staff officer. This is the same picture of Kriegspiel that we saw earlier in Jason's presentation. What do we see here? Well, we see a map laid out. We see units on the map. People lost in thought, people having side conversations, people explaining. They've got play aids in front of them. They're engaged. What does this look like with our game? Well, let's go. Same thing, except we have laptops out front. what we want to do, how shall I say it? It's not that you're playing the game. It's that you're using the game to adjudicate a staff exercise, a CPX exercise. We had a call from a real world unit that was in Fort Hood, Cavazos, currently, in 2019. And the major wanted to exercise his staff before doing a brigade exercise out in the field. And so we created a map for him. He set up his forces. We double checked it. Everything was good. And he used it. He exercised his staff. When they went out and did the exercise, apparently some of the staff used game terms rather than proper military terminology, but that's okay. That's all right. Just don't do that too often. And he was all set to do another one. They were then going to go to NTC with the brigade, and then COVID hit. Ouch. He then got promoted, and that was that. All of that didn't just happen. It's because we've been actually doing CPXs for a long time at Origins in Columbus, Ohio. That's where this picture was taken. And what we do at Origins is run a staff CPX. So we sell tickets, we get people who will role play staff members, and you'll have like 5 to 10 of them. And one will be the commanding officer, one will be intel, one's a CEO's, second in command, basically. Fires, operations, futures. And they play a 4-hour game. First hour is spent learning the military decision-making process. People pay to do that, spend an hour on that. They're then given the map, and we print out the game maps at Staples, and we bring in pens and papers. We have briefing materials. Everything is a focus on paper. And they make a plan. And so they'll be given, you are the staff of a battalion. You've been reinforced with this and this and this. Your objective is to go from this side of the map to the other side of the map, secure the bridge you find there over that river so that other forces will follow through and pass through you. So they spend an hour making the plan as if they were proper things. Half of the people typically are former military and know what to do and fit right in. The other half have no idea, but we have helpers and subject matter experts that will guide them through, okay, here's how you do an intel plan. Here's how as operations you work out what the different COAs might be. Make the plan, and then they walk over. We have a puckster, the gentleman here with silver hair and a silver beard. He's the only one that actually does the game stuff. Just as Jason described in his opening remarks, you just need one person. And he puts in the orders. He'll receive mission orders. A company is going here, B company is going there, C is in reserve. Get the helicopters over to the right because that's going to be empty for us. Something like that. He'll then do the details. They'll hit start and start executing, and the staff will immediately return to developing contingency plans and doing other staff type operations. And the intel guy will watch the screens that you see there looking for enemy units to pop up. They'll do the exercise for about 2.5 hours and then have a half hour at the end for lessons learned. This is a different shot of the same thing. It requires a facilitator, and the person in the light shirt standing here is the facilitator for this one. Again, everybody's sitting around the maps and the paper. They're not even looking at the computer. Facilitator is grinning evilly. You can't really see that in this picture, but that's what he does. He doesn't care what the penetration of a particular round against a particular armor face is or how fast something goes. He's stressing them as a staff. He's throwing things at them to make them upset. And that is the purpose of the exercise. So only he knows that there's a full strength Soviet tank regiment barreling down at them. He has other injects, but he's got a plan of decision points. He wants to see how they react, how quickly they identify, oh, there's more opposition here. And then, oh, I guess our plan has to be thrown away. That hour one is gone. What do we do now? And so on. And he's taking them through these stressful things that a staff in real life would have to do. And that's the point of the whole thing. Interestingly, he never lets it play out to the end. There's no victory or defeat. He's had a very specific reason. He said if they win, they think they're the greatest thing ever and don't learn anything after that. And if they lose, they think the game's unfair and they had no chance. And again, they don't learn anything. If you call it while it's hanging in the balance, they're super engaged. One more turn, one more turn. Our counterattack will succeed, we're sure. But it keeps the lessons, just perfectly in mind and fresh, and it's a teaching moment. Pure and simple. So that's kind of our experience with it as a training tool, a potential training tool. Another use you can use this is simply to spread awareness of wargaming. You need something to get out there. Marine Corps University Sea Dragon, which is a big event they had in 2019, used a modified version of the game. The Commandant's Cup, another Marine Corps University thing, last year, and this picture is from that, had a series of 3 different war games going, and teams from a number of different schools showed up and competed playing the games. So in this case, they really were playing the games, not using a puckster. But it raised awareness. MCU has this game on the Wargaming Cloud. Fight Club has access to it, and we're trying to increase that, ramp that up. And we have a professional customer in the UK where they really want a lot of UK active duty units doing this kind of thing. And they came to us and said, can you put in modern kit? Like, can you put in Challenger 3s? Can you use our training areas? Can you put in hypothetical force structures to make it interesting to these guys to actually explore it and play around a bit with it? And yes, we could. That's what it was made for. I'll just skip ahead because this is a third thing, and this ties again with what Jason Jones said earlier. Analyzing future capabilities. Because it's such an open system, you can customize so much of it and then run it in an automated fashion. Again, as with command, you don't need to be sitting there clicking through dialogues. You can just configure it to run headless, and it just runs to the end, and you've got all this data and report all sitting there neatly for you. You can interact with it while it's running lights out with Lua. And it's very simple now to run hundreds or even thousands of headless iterations and then dig into the data afterwards. I'm almost done now. Just want to talk a little bit about feature for the future. Obviously, with events in the Ukraine, highly interested in what's going on. We have some pretty well informed friends of the game. And we're switching over to more and more things that are drone related. We have them now. They're like miniature helicopters. There's so much more we could do. And so we're actively working on that over the summer. And the other big thing that we want to put in are long-range precision fires. So I'm talking HIMARS. The problem is the biggest our map goes is about 45 kilometers by 45. And we need to go hundreds of kilometers out. So we already have the ability to have off-map units, but we need to really ramp it up because more and more of the interesting stuff is not even on the map anymore. It's from elsewhere. And a final point for future stuff is that, again, with drones, but other things, they'll launch a drone. And in our world, okay, well, that's it. There's no way to defeat it. There's no way to degrade it. There's no way to throw it off. And so we need to add those things in. We want to be able to blind a drone. We want to be able to use kinetic effects, maybe, where the drone is like a munition, not so much a vehicle or a platform, but an individual round that's being expended by being used. But we want to be able to defeat it. So that will keep us busy for a considerable length of time, several months at least. And that is the professional edition of the game. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them now. Okay. Well, in that case, I'd like to hand over to my colleague from the combat mission side. And Merle, if you could take it from there.
Okay. So, my name is Steve Grammont. I am presenting about Combat Mission 2 Professional, and we'll be speaking a little bit about where we're going with Combat Mission 3. I'm going to just go through some slides. There's a couple of videos. Let's go in here. Okay, so Combat Mission Professional is a tactical ground combat simulator. We are the lowest level simulation of the three that you've heard about today. We have a full 3D environment. Our games are commercial as well as professional. We simulate a variety of World War II, late Cold War, and contemporary military settings. Every soldier is explicitly simulated. Weapons platforms are extensively detailed. So we're talking very detailed, realistic, and organizational structures for these things to be held in. We simulate both arid and temperate environments. We have 4 season weather effects for each environment, and we have day and night lighting based on the time of day and lunar cycle specified within the scenario parameters. We are also a WeGo turn-based system where both players input their orders and they are carried out simultaneously. We also have real-time mode, which takes input at any point in time. We support 1 or 2 players, and in the future we'll support more. We have multiple different ways of the players interacting with each other. And we have a fully integrated terrain and scenario editor, which allows us to, or allows our customers to make basically anything that they can dream up. Combat Mission in all of its iterations has been in commercial and professional, well, commercial use for 25 years and professional for at least the last 5 or so officially. So I'm just going to run a very quick video for visual orientation of what the battlefield looks like and sounds like.
Steve, I'm sorry. You need to share those slides so I can show them to the audience.
Oh, I thought we were already doing that.
Yours were not queued up. It's all good. We can fix it.
All right. So what do I do now?
Go down to the bottom and use the present button, and you can link to your desktop.
Okay. Right. Hang on. Oh, yeah. Okay. How are we doing?
You're good. They're on screen now.
All right. Well, that's what happens when you duck out of the program and forget to go back in the right way. Okay. So here we go. So this is looking up high. This is more of a medium view. This is totally up to the player as to how they view the battlefield. This is a good example of night combat. All the elements you would expect are simulated. And this is right down at the grunt view. Okay, so about the simulation itself. The resolution is to a partial meter. Line of sight and line of fire are degraded by the simulated environment. So trees, folds in the earth, and even temporary things like lighting, smoke, dust, and atmospheric effects have an impact instantly. Every round's path is traced from start to finish. This is really important with all the intervening terrain that is around. And it is possible for your rounds to be deflected based on whatever they impact, degraded in terms of quality, or changing their line of trajectory based on the interactions throughout. Rounds can go through vehicles and come out the other end. And the degraded effect of that on the munition is calculated. Nothing is predetermined. Everything is based on physics model. And that is really important when it comes to the ballistics and armor interaction, because really a couple of degrees difference with a couple of millimeters difference of armor thickness or a different type of armor can have profound impacts. We also simulate similar things with the munitions themselves, including historically known and identified flaws, such as brittleness and other factors, which made the weapons or the munitions perform differently than their statistics would seem to indicate. All systems within inside of a vehicle are modeled individually, so that there can be damaged and degraded subsystems effects. You can have a tank that is fully functional but effectively blind, for example. You can lose radio communications. You can have your engine damaged and still have a vehicle that can be dangerous. So that's all simulated. What Combat Mission is probably best known for is its soft factor modeling, such as morale and suppression and leadership qualities, and the cumulative impact of all of those things, such as training level, experience level. The different outcomes in combat that come from those elements alone is it's dramatic. You take the same exact scenario, you have everybody be elite, then you run the same scenario with everybody being conscript, and you will get entirely different results, as one would expect. And again, it's non-deterministic results. It's all based on the physics, the environment, interactions, and of course, just luck. That gets into the whole thing about you always want to be the first one to get the shot off if you're a tank. We simulate current and near future systems already. And I'll speak more about how we're extending that. We have near peer and unconventional forces, which means that you can be fighting against the equivalent of an organized militia with just poor quality equipment, organization, leadership, experience, all of that. But you can also fight against just scrappy ad hoc units that so essentially nothing more than maybe an AK or an RPG, and that is all possible. We simulate both arid and temperate environments, and that includes detailed urban treatments of both, and that can lead to a lot of different various, really, the urban scenarios are an eye-opener for those who have been concentrating a lot on sweeping maneuvers through fields and forests, but also if you have an environment which is inhospitable to maneuver, such as swamps, thick forests, rivers with bridges out, that poses its own set of challenges to people. We have on and off map artillery support assets, typically because our maps tend to be under 3K, 3 to 5K. Most artillery systems should be placed off map, but you have things like 60 millimeter mortars or direct fire support howitzers, things like that are allowed to be in either role, on or off map. We have air support. This is typically done, these are considered off map assets, of course. You get to choose the type of mission that they perform, whether they're going after armor or infantry, and included in that is UAS. We have right now, the whole concept of UAS was based on where things were prior to the Ukraine war. So we are in the process of integrating all of the new information in the proliferation of small drones versus the typical drones that we were used to prior to this, where there might be one per company, and it would be for ISR, and then you would have a higher level that might be able to, the Predator style, which might be able to zap a couple of vehicles. So that is something it is evolving with the combat mission as we go forward. So use cases, we have speculative modeling. We have the UK MOD with DSTL, we've heard about before me, and then defense industry. So let's just say a defense contractor wants to see how a new weapon system might perform differently on the battlefield compared to their previous version by adding a little bit of bling to something. They can do that. The professional military can swap out things to say, well, what happens if we add another LMG to this section? What happens if we remove a particular form of transport and replace it with something else? This is something that really is useful, especially when you have situations where you replace something and you don't anticipate knock-on effects, such as limited passenger capacity or the survivability of a unit because a complementary unit was removed. This is where we can really help understand those factors. Tactical training, we are used at West Point for cadet training for basically map exercise and leadership studies. We also have been in use with individual units that have decided to hone their own skills separate from their standard training procedures. As we know, soldiers in times of peace have a lot of time available, and combat mission can be used to fill some of that time. We have Fight Club, which you're going to be hearing more about at this conference. This is professionals who are across the world and play against each other to sharpen each other's skills. We have historical study. Let's not forget that a pretty good part of officer training is learning what has happened in the past. Many years ago, we did a custom version for the Australian Ministry of Defense for Crete, which was something that we hadn't simulated, but that was a very important battle for them historically, so we added that. And then there's personal time, individual readiness, whatever you want to call it. There is a way to stay sharp. There is a way to understand the battlefield in front of you without having to go through all of the other formal military training. You can just sit down and play the game and understand some things that maybe you would never experience as an officer. We have an interesting case that just came up. One of our customers turns out to be a U.S. volunteer drone pilot in Ukraine, and he used combat mission prior to going over to Ukraine. And when he was there with military professionals who had been fighting in Ukraine, and he found that he knew more about the equipment that the Russians and the Ukrainians were using than the people that were already there, just because he had a broader understanding. And he said that that was helpful as a drone pilot. Unexpected. All right, so here's a very short clipped video of DSTL using combat mission for their own purposes, much of which we don't know. As Jason alluded to, we don't have the clearance, but here we go.
Wargaming is a tool that we use in DSTL for a variety of reasons. So we use it to define new concepts. We use it to investigate analysis. Basically, it provides evidence for the military to improve their decision making. A lot of war games that the military run, you don't challenge it. You don't challenge the players particularly. It's there to help them learn doctrine and kind of get used to the idea of planning and things like that. What we're really interested in is pushing those people to their limits in terms of what they can do on the fly against a thinking opponent that's really trying hard to stop them from winning.
Almost bags of smoke out the middle.
There's two options. As much as we'd like to take him under 9-degree angle, that means you've got to defeat that anti-tank swing first. The ground, I think, does allow it because it does rise up. But again, you are going to take a certain amount of risk on what you lead with.
We wanted to create a scenario that basically has this kind of urban bit on the side to do some kind of close-in fighting, but then also a wider area to allow for maneuver. If we just done a pure urban scenario, you don't get, it's not necessarily that interesting. It's more just like a slogging match, basically. A lot of war games that happen, particularly ones that the military do, are very rote, they're very scripted, they're very set. What we try to do with this scenario is present them with a tough challenge that has a number of different solutions, that has a number of different ways that red can play it, and then blue has to respond to those different ways.
Purposes of the game today was to help us to understand better how they use the software. So we have regular conference calls with the DSTL team where they'll go through features and addition changes they want for the professional version. That's directly with the users straight to the development team, as that's really good to have that close cooperation between the user and the developer. Because if the developers don't understand the purpose of why a feature is trying to be implemented, then it can really add confusion, or you don't get the end result you're aiming for. And one of the reasons for me being here today is to see how they use it in practice. And that really helps us to have a deeper understanding of the way that they want to do things. And we can see where the pain points are with the software to help make it easy to use, or to work around some challenges that maybe the software wasn't designed to do, but the military has a certain way of doing things, or a requirement that a commercial customer wouldn't have.
All right. So some of the current tools we have for CM Professional is full battle replay, which is something that is not a feature in the commercial version. This was added to help with especially understanding the flow of the battle in one go. We allow custom force and equipment options to be modified using CSV formatted files, so basically Excel. You can change the force structures, the soldier loadouts, options for the vehicles. Those are all customizable. The data customization is somewhat limited in that we don't allow a lot of internal changes to core mechanics because we feel that it's a physics-based environment and they should not be manipulated. However, if you want to change the values within certain parameters, so say the rate of fire of something or the number of rounds that something is carried, those sorts of data points are allowed to be changed behind the scenes. And we have, and I'll show an example of this, all the results from the battle can be exported into a large, really large sheet. And this has been proved very useful because when there's something on the screen that is not really well understood, why did this get hit? Why did this blow up? That can be found right in this CSV. And this is just a very small snippet of a very large sheet. I mean, there's another few dozen columns. So you can find out how many rounds of ammunition were used to achieve a certain effect, and even total up results for the entire battle. So I'll touch very quickly on where we're going with CM3, which is a publicly announced product, but no details are publicly available. So I'm limited in what I can say. But you see there is an unmanned ground vehicle that is currently in CM2 Pro. You can expect to see a lot more of those in CM3. The new game engine that we've developed is based on Unity, which allows for a lot of more powerful environment for us, but also for more extensions for pro users. We have new force structures and soldier kit. Adding custom weapons platforms are now easier because of the Unity engine. We have open format unmanned systems. Instead of us trying to document 5,000 different types of unmanned systems that are out there, we can allow people to create their own, very similar to what you saw with Command. We will give a toolbox, and that will allow pretty much anything in the world now or in the near future to be simulated to whatever the customer's specifications are. And we will allow more manipulation of the data inside, in particular for things like electronic warfare and communications. So EW is going to be a major part of any battlefield in the future, and we are implementing a much more detailed simulation of that. We've also enhanced the map resolution. You would think we were partial meter in Combat Mission 2. That's true, but we had certain limitations for the terrain layout. Those are basically gone. Additional professional tools such as an AAR presentation tool. This should be a helpful tool for classroom experiences, as well as allowing more on-the-fly detail analytics during those presentations, so that you can see some of the things that are in the CSV output, but you can see them in the game at that particular time. And of course, the much beloved Monte Carlo mode, where you can batch process hundreds, thousands, millions of regression testing. This is done a bit right now, but it's with Combat Mission 2, but it needs to be refined. Okay, so there is the end of that presentation.
Okay, hey, that kind of wraps up what we have from Matrix Pro Sims at this time. We're kind of keeping an eye on the chat as well, but I do want to open it up if there are any questions from anybody. We'll stand by here for a few minutes, but if not, we really appreciate your time, your attention, and the questions that have come through. I don't have a song or dance or anything else, but I'll give you a little bit of time to roll some questions. I think our producers here have got us on kind of our pro page. Okay, yeah, great question, Chaz. So the question is, how do you go about convincing a non-wargaming commander? Given, I'm going to say that this is where. So I dealt with this problem in the Army a lot. It is. I think you got to do it in small bites. You've got to make them comfortable with the understanding that this is not that far removed from what we do when we go out into the field. Wargaming is really just a different way. Frankly, it's similar to a rehearsal. It's similar to a battle drill. It's just maybe our focus is a bit different. I think if you ask anybody about doing a rehearsal in the motor pool, before going out to the field, a map rehearsal. I mean, this is just high-end map rehearsal that we're doing here. And then we assign, just like going to the field, we assign some objectives. We make sure that we're going to meet requirements. And then, like I said in my talk at the beginning, if you heard that, we need to bring military discipline and structure to it. So when we did our thesis, again, using a first-person shooter, we gave everybody about 3 minutes to jump around and act like fools. And then we said, okay, time to lock it down. Now it's time to go into the game. And you use all the tools you would normally use. So we take a screenshot of the map. And if you can, you build a sand table. And we go through the troop leading procedures. If you can't, if you don't have a sand table or something, you find an appropriate means to do that kind of map rehearsal. So the more you apply the structure to it that you would normally do to go to the field, the easier it is for them to recognize that we're just doing the cognitive half of the exercise. We're not necessarily, we're not gaming for the sake of gaming, and this is the challenge. That VBS, some of the virtual systems where it's an individual, one person in a platform operating their system. Well, that's not what we're trying to do here. We're really trying to do a leader's recon, a map recon. We're trying to see that environment. That's the way to start. And I would almost submit that you kind of want to underrepresent the game. Again, back in thesis work, if I can represent 2 football teams, whether it's American football or European football, with X's and O's, why can't I use a game to do the same? You've got to understand what the limitations are of the software and what the benefits are and the capabilities that you get. But that's where you start. I think anything else, like trying to get them to jump in, I mean, tactics in Call of Duty. Yeah, I mean, you could use them, but the game wasn't designed, to be super precise that way. I mean, if you want to do entry, you can get door kickers. There's a pretty interesting logic on how to, execute room clearance and room entry. I saw a video the other day on, somebody deciding between running the rabbit and pushing, and would door kickers represent that? And this is where it becomes really important to understand the fidelity of the software that you've chosen, because like he may be running the rabbit or pushing represents well in door kickers because of how they built it, but maybe not so much if you're doing Call of Duty, where essentially it's just twitch and kill. So yeah, and then Command has its points, Combat Mission, Flashpoint Campaigns. They all have the things they do well, and that's where it really comes down to you for picking the right title for the purpose, and then building from that. So yeah, any other questions? Thanks for asking, Jess. All right. So with that, I think we're done. Anytime you want to reach out and discuss, I mean, part of my job is just helping helping answer that question. Like, how do we use games in the defense community? Now, getting them installed in the defense community is a whole other conversation, but I'm happy to have that conversation. We've done it with a lot of different folks in the past. So with that, I think we're all wrapped up. Again, thanks for letting us kind of kick off Connections Online 2025, and look forward to hearing from everybody else throughout the event. Thanks, guys.